All right, let's go ahead and get started with our chat module. So the first thing I'm going to implement is going to be within our chat form. And the reason for that is for our chat, what we're going to do is we are going to have the input say, have a placeholder of please log in if you're not logged in. And then if you hit enter, you will then send a message to the user store to actually perform the login. Now, what's interesting is we're now going to have to take a dependency on the user store within the chat form component. So I'm going to implement that just like our users component by saying users store, and then down here I'll say this.users equals users store, because we need to know if we're logged in or not. But remember, chat form component is created by the chat component. So let's go up to the chat component and in his constructor, add the user store and say this users equals user store. And then when we instantiate the chat list component, we'll say this users. So we're taking that dependency and we're passing it all the way down to the component that's actually going to be using it. So now let's go down to the bottom, and also in the chat component constructor, now that we have that parameter, we now have to say services.userStore. And it doesn't like that. Oh yeah, I have to import user store, don't I? Let's just do user store, and then at the top, let's say after the CSS, let's import user store from back to services. And that should be happy now. Okay, now that we have that dependency, let's go ahead and do our input. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the placeholder of the input depending on whether or not we're logged in. So I'm going to say this user's current user money dot comp subscribe this. Remember comp subscribe because this is in a component. Comp subscribe this user goes into, and then I'm simply going to say this input dot adder placeholder is going to be user is logged in question mark blank, otherwise enter a username. So now if we come back into our thing here, ESLint is throwing a fit because I'm missing a semicolon. Come back here, and you'll see that unfortunately there was an error. Couldn't read property current user of undefined. It really doesn't want to. This user's user store. User store comes from chat. User store, this user's. Oh, I passed in this user's and chat list component, not chat form component. That's my mistake. Make sure that you pass it into chat form component. You guys probably caught that. Anyway, let's go ahead and refresh. We still cannot read that property. Let's console log user store out at this level and see what happens. Undefined. So we get undefined there in the chat form component. So now let's jump into our chat component, and right here, it's actually that. Come back here, and it looks like we're also getting undefined there as well. So we're not actually getting our user store from our services, which is kind of a silly thing. So let's go ahead and check out our services and see what's going on there. So we get the user store and we export it, and then oops, I did user stores instead of user store. You guys probably caught that too. I'm sorry. Anyway, so make sure you spell everything right. Come back here and check that out. Enter a username right there. Didn't even need to refresh. The entire module was reloaded. So, yep, that is awesome. So now what we have to do is inside of our chat form, we need to actually go ahead and perform some logic. So we need to check the event or hook into the input event when the key is down, and then when they hit enter, do something. So I'm going to import observable first of all. Import observable from RxJS. And then I'm going to say observable dot from event this input, passing in key down. Then I'm going to say, this is going to be a long method chain, so I'm going to delineate this method chain with comments. I'm going to say get values, the first step. We need to extract the values. So filter e.key code with a capital C equals 13. 13 is the key code for inner. I can maybe put that in here. Code for inner. Maybe turn it into a const or something cool like that. I don't know. Anyway, and then dot do dot prevent default. So if it is 13, the first thing we do is we prevent default on it. Then we map it to e goes into e target dot value, and then we filter it by e goes into e length. We actually want to do e target value trim. We want to trim the value from the input to trim off any excess white space characters. And then we filter by length to make sure that after the trim operation, there's actually some data there. So then I'll say login or send message. So I'm going to say with latest from, and with latest from this users dot current user. So with latest from the current user dot flat map. And the first one is going to be the value. The second one is going to be the user. And I'm going to go flat map into a method. I messed that up bad, didn't I? There we go. Flat map into a method, and the method is going to say, if not user is logged in, then return this underscore login value. Otherwise, return this send message value. Then display message. So I'll subscribe or comp subscribe this on response. And response might be an error from us either logging in or sending a message. So I can turn this into a ternary. That's really bothering me. If user is logged in, or I'll do it like this. I really don't like that lopsided if statement. It really irritated me. There we go. That looks a lot better. Okay, so if user is logged in, then return this send message, otherwise return value. Also, these should have money at the end of them because they're returning streams, and I really liked it to keep that in mind if methods return streams or observables or not. And then I'm going to say if response and response error, then I'm going to show the error. And how am I going to show the error? Well, I'm going to show the error by creating a div element that I totally forgot to create when we were putting this together. So after we create our input, I'm going to say this error equals, actually I'm going to put this above our input, equals div class equals chat error. And I'm going to say dot append to this element. So this error div is what's going to contain our errors if there is one. So I'm going to say this error text is response.error. Otherwise, this error hide. Actually, I want to do this error.show.text response error, otherwise this error hide. And there you go. That is our awesome key down event. So just another example of using reactive extensions to deal with input from the DOM. So now let's go ahead and implement our send message and log in. So let's scroll down here at the bottom and say send message money value, and we're just going to return observable.empty right now. And then otherwise, for our login, I'm going to say login money username, and I'm going to say return this dot users dot login money username. So I'm deferring into that. But I'm going to do something interesting here with the login. When we start the login operation, I'm going to say this input dot adder disabled is disabled. And then on this login, I'm going to do this input dot val blank. And then I'm going to say finally, I'll explain this all in a second. Finally, this input dot adder disabled null, and this input focus. So what's going on here is what we're doing is we're saying, let's go ahead and disable the input. Then let's go ahead and log in. And then after we start the login process, go ahead in this stream and reset our input value to blank. And then finally is invoked at the end of the stream. Finally, when everything's done, whether or not it failed, whether there was an error or not, go ahead and make it the input no longer disabled and focus it. So let's go ahead and make ESLint happy real fast for that. And then let's come back into Chrome and let's see what behavior we get. So if I do some garbage here and hit enter, we get uncaught object object. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. Uncaught object object. It's happening from observable socket right here. So this is an interesting thing. This is actually playing into something that we have needed to do but never had a reason to do it yet. And that's another operator that I'm going to introduce. Before I introduce that operator, though, I'm going to do this manually. Basically, at the end of the day, if an error happens on an observable stream, that stream is done. That's just how observable streams work. But we don't want the stream to end if the server returned an error about logging in. Because if this stream gets done, remember, this stream gets merged into this stream. If that stream gets done, we no longer even hook into this event anymore. Well, that seems silly. You get one opportunity to log in, and then, well, you can't log in anymore. It's just a behavior of reactive extensions. And I talked a bit about this in the section about errors in the reactive extensions course. So what instead we need to do is we need to catch errors and turn them into something that can be consumed in our response. And what do we expect here with our response? We expect it to potentially have an error property. So what if I did this user's login catch, error goes into our observable of error. Hit Control S. Come back into here, put in some garbage, hit enter, check that out. We're now getting the errors where they should be happening. Of course, it's still saying object object, which is not even close to what I wanted. Instead, I wanted response error.message. So save that out, and now do that. And now it says username can only contain numbers, digits, underscores, and dashes, which is the validation coming from the client side. Anyway, let's go ahead and log in for real here. Type in test, and we're logged in. Let's duplicate this. And unfortunately, cannot... oh, it's because caching. And then let's log in as whoa. Check that out. 2 users, test and whoa. Let's duplicate this again. And let's try to log in as test. Hit enter. Username test is already taken. That is an error coming from the server. And I think that's awesome. And now I can log in as Blay. So now we have 3 users logged in. Now, I think that's pretty cool. I don't know about you guys. So obviously, we haven't implemented our send message yet. In fact, we haven't even implemented our chat store or our chat module. Chat stores and chat modules are actually be very simple. And I think we'll start looking at that in the next video. But for now, I'll just scroll through our chat form as we have it right now. Just a really straightforward piece of code here. Maybe not so much if you're not so familiar with reactive extensions. But again, the whole point of this series is to start getting people used to them. Start getting people to use them and take advantage of their features. Like, for example, right here, this flat map and this with latest from. I'm using the result of another stream, and then I'm using it with a flat map to branch off into 1 or 2 different things. Anyway, I do want to do one more thing. Actually, I promised this earlier, and I almost forgot about it. But I'm going to turn this catch code right here into an operator, because I do this a lot. There are a lot of instances where I don't want the error to terminate the sequence, but I do want there to be an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce catch wrap, or what I ended up calling catch wrap. It's fun to say. And we're going to do that under shared operators. And I'm going to say observable prototype dot catch wrap equals function. And catch wrap is simply going to return the result of that code. It's simply going to return this dot and then catch error. So now I can replace all this code right here with catch wrap. Catch wrap. So now this catch wrap code is going to do that behavior right there. So now we have a standard way of dealing with errors. There's one more thing I want to do, actually, now that we can log in with different usernames. If the server dies, but you were logged in, I want you to still be logged in. I want there to be another attempt at logging in. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and jump into our store, our user store, our only store at this point. Don't worry, we'll have 2 more soon. And I'm going to come down here to our Bootstrap, and I'm going to say on connect users list, and then I'm going to say, if not this is logged in, return. Remember, we are in our user store in our constructor, and I want to re-log in if we are logged in. So if not, we're not logged in, return, bail out. Otherwise, this login money, this current user.name.subscribe, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say next, or sorry, user goes into and console logged in again as user.name. Otherwise, if there was an error, I want to say error alert could not log back in, and then it's simply going to be error.message or unknown error. So there we go. So with this little bit of code, we will relog in if the server restarts. Let me prove it to you. So if we come over here and open up our server and our client, I'm going to refresh our client, and I'm going to log in as bleh. Now I'm going to kill the server. So I'm going to come over here to the code, and I'm going to do something that's going to cause the server to restart. Actually, you know what? I think I can just type in rs right here, and nodemon will restart. Let's try that. rs. Oh, and we restarted. Check that out. Let's do it again. That's fun. You see it flash. You might not see it flash with the frames per second in the video, but it did flash. It did flash temporarily to 0 when it got the user, but then it flashed back into having 1 user bleh just for a second there when we logged in. And now we can restart our server and we'll still be logged in, and everything is awesome. So with that, in the next video, we'll start working on the actual chat logic. So we'll see you guys then.